Hi again. Now I'm going to do another video for the Opening of the Key series, and this one is going to be on the actual first operation. Okay. So in the previous videos, sort of introduced it, then we talked about elemental dignities, then we talked about card counting and card pairing, and so now we're going to see all that put together in practice, okay, for the first operation. So I've already shuffled to save some time, and the significator I chose for the imaginary querent is the Knight of Discs in Crowley's top deck. Okay. Um, so traditionally what you would do, what they all say to do, is before you even shuffle, you are supposed to invoke the traditional invocation that I actually use, because I think it's a nice centering moment, and a nice appeal to, um, well, to God, however you would like to see it, and sort of makes the spread feel more contemplative and prayerful from the get-go. Uh, okay, so typically what you would do is you would hold it in your left hand and just simply place your right hand on top or point or whatever, and you would say, with your eyes closed usually, I invoke thee, Iao, that thou wilt send Heru, the great angel who art set over the operations of this secret wisdom, that he may lay his hand invisibly upon these consecrated cards of art, and that thereby we may obtain true knowledge of hidden things, to the glory of thine ineffable name. Amen. And then what you do is you take your right hand and your wand-esque fingers, and you draw, starting from the top and going down towards the left, you draw a pentagram, but you still do it with your eyes closed and you imagine it in white light. Okay, so each line in white, and you just draw it from the top down to the left, then up to the opposite corner towards the right, across towards the left, and then down towards the lower right corner, and then up towards the top again to finish. Okay? And the brighter, the better. It's just a cleansing thing. Because remember, brilliant white light is associated with Keter at the top of the Tree of Life, which is the unity, etc. Okay, so we're already shuffled. So what you would do is, let's see. Okay, you've got your pile here, and you would cut in half, and you would take the top pile, and place it to the right. Some people do it differently. This is how I do it, because I think it makes more sense. Then you take the pile that's on your left and you cut that in half and place that top pile towards the right again. Then you take the first pile now that you cut towards the right, cut that in half and put that to the right. So you should have 4 piles of X number of cards, okay? So now this is the one all the way to your right is the fire pile and is associated with the letter Yod of Tetragrammaton. The second pile from the right is the water pile. This is associated with the He primal of Tetragrammaton. This is the air pile, which is associated with the Vav. And this is the earth pile, which is Malchut, or the He final, rather. Okay. So essentially this spread is governed by the aces and the princesses, because they're essentially synonymous. Okay, so then you would flip them over. So you've got fire here, water again, air and earth. And then you read the top card. Now, traditionally, these represent separate situations, technically, that are all sort of interconnected, because each pile represents a different aspect of your life. And so since you're technically asking about a single issue or question, they are supposed to be all connected somehow. So in the fire pile we have the Two of Cups. Now some people would say that because it's a fire pile, the elemental dignity of the Two of Cups is already weak. So there is a way of reading with elemental dignities where you count the entire elemental attribute of the entire pile and say, well, the entire pile is fire, so all the water cards are sort of immediately depressed or not really as strong as they could be. But I choose not to read that way. Again, it just makes it too complicated, and I prefer simplicity when it comes to a spread like this. Okay. but by all means do whatever works for you. So we would say, so the fire pile is about sort of your passions, your creative impulse, things that you're working on currently, things that you're really driven to do. And here we have the Two of Cups, which is about, love and relationships. So this person, the Knight of Discs, is focused primarily on his relationships and finding a loving one, finding a partner of some kind, that sort of thing. So he's preoccupied with that. In his water pile, this is more of his emotions and how he's really feeling about that action. And the Knight of Wands as an energy, perhaps this is the target of his affections. Perhaps this is a homosexual relationship or something like that, where the Knight of Wands is the person of his affection, or is perhaps just a really good friend, or if it represents the knight himself in another way, it could show that he feels very excited and sort of adventurous about all this. He's maybe interested in finding someone who's not really in his usual sphere of interests. Now, the air pile is usually the concerns, the things that are on the table that are actively distressing the querent, or communications, partnerships, that sort of thing, the more logistic realm. Okay, and this, as the Wheel of Fortune tells us, that there's a lot going on in general in this person's life, that, it's sort of, it's not really a good moment necessarily to be focusing on stuff like this, or, just they have a lot on their plate in general, and things are not very stable. Perhaps it also, because it's strong, it may say that the person does have a good amount of luck on their side, that things are sort of working in their favor at the moment. And the earth pile is more the final dispensation, the problem in actuality, or something like that, the situation in the material plane. And the Six of Wands, of course, is the Lord of Victory. And so we see that in terms of the actual output of all this, the actual result of all this striving here, that the person has been very successful, and that perhaps they feel like they have met that person, or they feel accomplished in some way due to their efforts. Okay, so now we would look for the significator, the Knight of Discs, and he's in the fire pile. So technically what we would do, I apologize, Mr. Barlow, but you would technically, as according to tradition, get rid of the other piles and just read, especially if you're doing all 5 operations. Spare yourself and don't read every pile. You will be here for a day. So you take the pile that the significator is in, and you spread it from left to right. You can also spread it right to left. It probably makes more Kabbalistic sense to do it right to left because of Hebrew, as I mentioned in another video. You read Hebrew right to left. But I do left to right. I don't remember when I started doing it that way. I used to do it right to left, I think. I don't know. But we'll spread left to right. Okay? And so we've got all these cards here. Now, our significator is here. This is the Knight of Discs here. Okay? And it's very important that you don't lose the order of these cards, because the order is everything, obviously, in a narrative, linear spread like this, or relatively linear. Okay, so we would count from him. We would start from him first. This is the fire pile, so this is dealing with his focuses, his passions, his creative energies. Okay, so he's here, and he's surrounded by the 3 of wands here, and the 2 of discs here. So neither of those energies is particularly offensive to the knight. He likes the 2 of discs, and is sort of, jiving with the 3 of wands, though not exactly energized by it. So we would say that he's got plans in general, in his sphere of goals. He's got his eye on the future to some extent, but he's also sort of dealing at the moment with financial flux, that his primary issue is one of financial instability, sort of going back and forth between having stuff and having resources and not really having resources. So that's where he starts. Now, even though he's facing towards the right very obviously, remember, sometimes I choose Paul's method of counting left for all the men and right for all the women. just because that's how I learned. Paul Hughes Barlow getting lots of shout-outs in these videos. So for him, we would count towards the left 4, remember, because he is a court card that is not a princess. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we arrive at the next part of the situation, which is the 5 of cups. Now this is surrounded by temperance or art, and the 9 of cups here. So the main situation, remember, is the 5 of cups. That is what we want to actually talk about. And the fact that it's got fire on its side shows that it's under assault in some way. So fire and water, not so happy. But it has this other water card, the 9 of cups, on the side to sort of save it. So we have what is called a bridge triad, where we have the 9 sort of comes in to rescue the 5 and sort of brings it to a balance, brings the triad as a whole to a relatively strong position. So we would still read it as something relevant. Whereas if there were 2 fire cards, we would sort of ignore this card completely, as according to the traditional rules. So we would say, this is sort of interesting. It's like part of them wants to be more responsible in some way, more focused on conservation of their resources. But the thing is, they're not particularly in a good place. They're sort of depressed by things. They're not really happy with where they are, and so they try to perhaps use material things to satisfy them, to sort of keep them afloat emotionally. Okay, so that's how I would read that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we get the Prince of Discs. Now we can say that this is an avatar of the querent here, or we can say that this is a new person entirely. I tend to choose the latter, where it's a new person entirely. And this, from here on, we're focusing on his influence. So the querent had his brief influence, and now we have another person. And this person, the Prince of Discs, is pretty plotting, and not plotting, plodding. And he's surrounded by a water card and a fire card. Now, technically, these 2 cancel out, so we would ignore them entirely and just read the card as is. And so we would say, while the querent is looking to sort of satisfy himself in a material way, he meets the Prince of Discs, who is sort of an industrious person, not particularly interesting, but perhaps ruggedly handsome or something like that, or very honest, that sort of thing. And then we would count 4 from him. Now here's the other thing too. Some people, when you hit a court card, they change direction. So based on whether or not it should. Now, since he's a male, we would continue counting towards the left. But if, let's say, he were a female, some people would start counting now towards the right again. Now, I sort of disagree with this because that's not what the Golden Dawn actually says to do. Golden Dawn actually says to just keep counting in one direction. Okay, so from him, we get 2, 3, 4. We get the 6 of discs, and the 6 of discs is again surrounded by water and fire, so the water and fire cancel each other out, and we just read the 6 of discs here. Okay, sorry if we can't really see this whole thing. But the 6 of discs then is, you would just read it as is. Okay, so then you continue until you count a card that you already touched upon. And then we would simply pair from the ends towards the middle, and that's basically it. So just to do an example of some of the pairing, we would say, the fire and water cards at the ends cancel out. Then we have 2 earth cards, the Hierophant and the 6 of discs. And then we would maybe say that while in an education setting, or perhaps they're looking for education jobs at the moment, or they're a teacher of some kind and they're very good at what they do. Continue pairing. We have 2 water cards, but at the same time, they're sort of disappointed that the dreams that they want are not coming true. So you just continue pairing, and then whatever you end up with is sort of the final result for now. And then this spread talks about where the querent is in the present. This describes the present situation. Okay? Hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions, let me know.